You muted, Dr. Sharif.
Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episodes and this is our 736th episode. We will discuss on know your customer security in the age of bots and deepfakes. Beside that, I just want to share that World Talent Economy Forum collaborate with four different cities in Bangladesh and India. We are uplifting around 8 million peoples and hopefully soon with our model science, engineering and technology we can solve healthcare, waters, energy and housing problem. Let's start the discussion. First, I would like to give chance Mr. Eric.
Well, I grew up in the area of government security where you're really worried about people penetrating your servers and getting through and database attacks, going in and changing your data. Once I found because just of a upgrade challenge in Microsoft that we were being a host for illegal bootleg games and pornography. We were a storage site, so so you know just using your facilities, your capabilities, your resources, and then penetrating and making changes, doing bad things, and then with people coming in, you just wonder if a standard customer is who they say they are, and now we've gotten a lot of that with two-party authentication, where when every time I log into my bank, it sends me a text message on my phone. But the real key now is there's a couple problems. One is, do we know who each of us is here, and how do we even know we're the same person? So how do we know that Lisa and I aren't actually the same person? Uh, 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 Putting that in. So just watching America's Got Talents, one of the acts was where they got the judges to perform fake. They faked the judges, and they had the judges performing on stage and singing opera and things that they, normally wouldn't do. So that one thing is, how do we know each of us is who we are? And the other part of that is, how do we know that multiple people are? For example, if we're voting on a free tip to visit World Talent Economy Forum, and we might want to get as many votes as possible, so we could create multiple versions of us, so we have multiple votes. And I'm glad to see Jesse here. He's got some interesting. I know that's one of his passions. But the real key today is it's getting easy and easier to fake who we are. So one way to fix that is make sure you show up in person and really prove who you are. Well, the problem with that is that now you have to worry about privacy. Maybe I don't want to show my face. What happens then? So I think that's a fairly good foundation. This idea of used to be just people providing false information, and then and false documents to prove. The same way was just I'll lie to you and give you false information. The second thing is, well, not only will I lie to you, I'll fake my documents so that you have some proof that I'm who I say I am. The other thing was to create anonymous entities and hide behind that. The only other thing I'll add is you've got a battle in this know your customer in complying with anti-money laundering laws, compliance in the US, and GDPR, data privacy laws. So all those things come into play. But I'm interested to hear what everybody else says.
Dr. Talib.
Well, I've listened to what Eric said very carefully, and I think the issue of privacy is an issue here. But it's not something that is so big, especially for us in the developing world. I come from a developing country. For those of you that don't know, I'm speaking to you from Jordan, Amman, Jordan, and that's a country that is a developing country. Now, the issue of privacy is not an issue here. It's not on people's minds, but it is on people's minds when it comes to the developed world, to the United States particularly. Now, I don't know what is the term fake whose mean. what does the term free industrial metaverse speakers from around the world? I think you said something about trying to describe this age and time, like deep foot and something like that. I think that's a very unfair description of the age and time we're living in, because we are living in good times. We are now approaching a new approach. I think that
Dr. Talib.
Who's next?
Dr. Talib, I cannot hear you. Now I request Madam Lisa.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. I see lately in the past couple of years because we play blockchain games, some of which are becoming decentralized.
Lisa, you're muted.
I
There you
know,
go.
somehow I got muted. Okay, as I was saying, we're thinking a lot about decentralization because some of the blockchain games are becoming decentralized, and so the community needs to decide what's important and how. And clearly, every project is a challenge and expensive if you don't know what to do or how to do it, but some people know parts of it, and so it's a great exercise. But one of the things I'm learning is that more and more we can see, especially with technology, the history of what people have done on chain. And if you combine that with exchanges and with social media and potentially IP addresses from websites, you can pretty closely see maybe not who that person is, but what that actor is doing. And I tend to think that might, especially in the future, become even more powerful than accepting what someone is telling you is true. Because if KYC process is required, people will, in some proportion, act with false information. So if you're not relying on information like that and using actions, I think it's going to become more reliable, and that lends ourselves to think about rules. Terms of service and for example, are rules. And I'm learning as people make rules, that brings in all sorts of other users than maybe the target audience of players or whomever you're hoping will engage with that system. It leads to people breaking the rules and then also hunting the people breaking the rules and then trying to hire people who can break rules or can find the people breaking the rules. And it gets to be this whole like, that's the game, right? So I've been thinking very carefully about how to maybe we stick with as few rules as possible, or at least start with one, maybe with 3 variables or something, yes or no. And if you need a fourth, start another group. Like there's something about the small group nature of decentralization and rules worth thinking about. So anyway, glad to join you all today to share these recent thoughts with you because it's certainly been on my mind.
Thank you. Now I request Mr. Steven.
Yeah, this is, I haven't joined one of these in a while, but this piqued my curiosity because Know Your Customer, that's actually one of my businesses. I have easyofac.com, Office of Foreign Asset Control, has, the big long list of people and organizations that you're not supposed to do business with because they're either money launderers or drug cartels or things like that. So making those kinds of processes easy and and intuitive and smart is as a big part of being successful in this. You know, back in the day, you didn't always need to know, and still today, you don't always need to know who your customer is. You know, if somebody's walking up to a bar in the Old West, putting down a silver coin and asking for you know, a shot of whiskey, you don't need to know who that is unless it's Billy the Kid. You know, if your life's in danger, you might want to know. But for the most part, you don't need to know customers and transactions until it hits a certain maybe financial threshold, or the nature of the transaction requires making sure that you know that this person actually owns this real estate that you're buying from them, things like that. So I agree with Lisa. There's certain thresholds that probably we should identify early on as to, do we need to know who this person is? And if we need to know, Eric has already mentioned this, it's all based off of information and what information they provide you, and is that information true? So there's verifying that information, there's verifying that it's a live person, and there's technologies that are coming out more and more to be able to do this kind of thing. One of that I saw recently makes you hold your driver's license up, and then it takes a picture of your driver's license at the same time it's looking at your face, and then it tells you to look different directions real time to identify that you're actually a real person. Excuse me. So that's all great, all this technology coming up in this. One of the things that sticks out to me, a client that I have been working with had a lot of fraud going through their business, and identified it based off of nefarious actors were opening real bank accounts with actual people's information somewhere, and then using those bank accounts to float money through this system. And one of the problems with that is that you can do all your KYC information on your organization, and you know your customer, and you do due diligence, but it's not just about you anymore. It's about every organization along the way that touches that information or touches that transaction. Where is the weakest link? And that's where the failure happens. So you can come up with almost any sort of, you know, rule system that says, you have to vet your customers and make sure that this information is great. But you show me any system like that, and I'll show you where somebody is finding the weakness and exploiting that system. So we can keep making rules, but at some point, though, even those rules will be circumvented. So it's about, this is what I tell all my clients, it's about due diligence and making sure that you did your work, you did your homework to the best of your ability. No one's going to be able to guarantee any transaction, but at least you can do your homework and make sure it's the best possible. So that's my opening comments. Excited to hear what others have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Jason.
Thank you. You know, building on that, I agree with the comments so far. I think Eric really did establish a foundation for the importance of the topic, because identity is not just important for financial services. Like, a strong identity proof is useful in so many facets of life that it's an important piece of information. Let's just start with that. And to Lisa's point, I agree as well that simplicity is a sign of success, right? If you can explain it and understand it in relatively simple terms, and then it can be passed along and everyone can know, and it can be a system that works. It's universally a working system. What I would build on to add is that a proof of personhood is really kind of just the beginning. A proof of personhood is that you are who you say you are, that your name is correct, etc. And I would like to visualize this proof schematic as a web of trust. Whatever documentation a person is provided from where they are, or like if you have a proof of address in any form, a bill that you received by postal service or something, then those all triangulate into your proof of personhood to start. And that maybe aspects of identity is the jurisdictional treatment for those documents, and that it's not quite a universal system that people use to check. But we use alternative web of trust tools to build identity tools, because the proof of personhood is really just the beginning. There's very much that belongs to the identity stack, like whether a person is at graduate level of any stripe or description, or is an accredited investor, or has permission to travel to one place or another, or is on the list of cannot trade with, right? The sanctioned list. These are important pieces of information that we're building out because they're getting challenged, right? The whatever system is used is going to withstand the constant weathering of human creativity for people who will try to undermine the system or exploit its vulnerabilities somehow or whatever. And that the stronger the proof and the simpler the system, the better it can work. And it really does have a way of reaching a lot of other problems, preventable problems. Put this together. And if we do it for digital assets, then count it as a nice sort of side benefit to the innovative energy within the industry. I'll leave that as my introduction comments.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now I request Mr. Jesse Jeff.
Hey everyone! By the way, congratulations on over 700 episodes. That's a great job. I'm first time on the program here. So yes, I've been working on authentication solutions. So I'd like to answer Eric's question that he asked from the beginning. How do we know that Eric and Lisa are in fact different people? And I would say that, so there's a couple points here. The first point is that we will never know 100% certain that they are not the same person, but everything's relative in this world. So if we could just do a better job of, call it like civil mitigation versus 100% civil protection, that's probably unrealistic. But in my opinion, and the solution that I'm working on is, I know with great confidence that Eric and Lisa are different people because they are on the same call right now at the same time. And I'm watching both of them and they're moving their head in a different way. They would have to be, whoever is, maybe if they're one person, they have to be very, very sophisticated to pull off that, wow, we see that they're two different people. Yes, there's deep fakes, there's AI coming, but this is on the very high end of time, cost, and sophistication. I think that a system, so to Steven's point, yes, any system has trade-offs, and someone like Steven could identify where the weak point is. But I think that if we as a community can agree on an acceptable rate of fraud, let's say, and we service the rest of the 99% people and try to get fraud to a minimum, I think that's a realistic goal. So this is essentially what I'm working on. You take a bunch of people, you randomize them into Zoom rooms or YouTube rooms or whatever like this, and they have to be at the same place at the same time. So if you're trying to be multiple people, you're going to have simultaneous conversations. If you're randomly in all these different rooms, eventually at scale, make it obvious that you're trying to be multiple people if you have people checking these recordings. And so this is kind of where I think we should go with the authentication. It doesn't require any document-based information. So I'm coming from the crypto world, and government IDs and proof of residence is not going to work in our world. To Eric's point about privacy, like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want special access you're going to have to give up at least some information. And I think the lowest threshold to that is just showing up on a video. You can use a fake name. You can blur your screen like I'm doing here. You can hide certain things, but you need to give up a little something if you want that carrot at the end of the pot at the end of the rainbow. So those are my thoughts. I'm working on this, and so I'm glad to be here, and yeah, looking forward to the rest of the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith.
Well, Dr. Sharif, thank you so much for letting me be part of today's show. It's one which I think, as you know, I have an intense interest in. I've loved the comments, particularly some that Lisa made and things too about the people who could do things. And Sharif, as you know, in one of the companies I founded, we actually designed and stood up over 40 security network operating centers for the states around the country. And in that, we actually had black hat and white hat hackers, pen testers, who went and tested the systems of all the state agencies and things in all those states. And we've done the same for companies and things too. And Lisa, what's really interesting is even the people who think they have good security, most of them do not. And that while I would like the minimal regulations in place, unfortunately, most companies do not even follow any best practices, much less a regulatory approach. So it's really a chicken and an egg problem as you get there. If I look at the more robust space, like Dr. Tlaib was talking about, and Stephen was talking about earlier, there's a concept called GANs, which are generative adversarial networks. And these are really ones where neural networks and machine learning are coming together to really make the deep fakes, the identity protection and things really difficult. But I want to go back to a basic, and Eric, this is a place where you and I are together, but slightly different on what you said before. When you look at IT security, and I'm going to basically stay with IT security, there's something called 5. And if you begin to build your practice for your privacy and your security around these, you're going to actually be in better shape, I believe, than without it. And the first pillar of this is confidentiality. And it is one of the most important parts of information security. If you cannot put the confidentiality around what you're doing, you have a real difficulty. And this could be through encryption. It can be protecting even the address of the network. In my companies that I run, we actually, even for our websites, we use something called reverse proxy. So that if Jason was trying to access my websites today, he actually goes to a proxy and does not directly address the website from his browser window, which gets us into a way that gives us some of the protection on this. The difference is data and information integrity. That's the second pillar of the 5. And you've got to begin to do that. You've got to make sure that the data is not tampered with. So that's doing things like hash signatures and others to there. The second is availability. You only want people on it, accessing it, who have the need to know and what it can be. There's authority and authentication, and just like what was being said a moment ago by Jesse and everything, you've got to be able to identify who the person is. I actually almost
Cutting off David. Continue.
So David, I think he's freezing. Dr. Talib Rafal, do you want to add any point?
No, I just want to say something.
Yes,
Stephen.
and I don't know where you lost me, but if I could put Eric's head on.
Cutting off, you're cutting off, David. It's not working.
But the last one is non-repudiation. And that's where you, between two agents, you know that the data was sent, that it was received. I add that it has to be auditable. And, some people are using blockchain for that. Blockchain I almost would trust. I do not trust basic blockchain at all for auditability today. Then the other one is it has to be recoverable. It has to be repeatable. But you need to have the ability to have measures in place to restore the data back to its original form. And that, to me, is really important as you look at this today. Some of you know that I've also worked with some government agencies where I was the futurist looking out 30 to 50 years in the future in cybersecurity and this whole area. And it's always a cat and mouse game. Any time you think you have something, it's already been broken. We were doing a study for this one agency, and this is when people were coming out and trying to put security around movies online. And they were doing different types of security schemes. And what we found out is 20 days before this new security scheme launched, like on a Netflix or a place like that, there already was a hack for it on the internet, even before it officially launched. So this is a game of cat and mouse going through it. And the security, particularly look at bots and deep fakes, it's going to be very difficult to do it. I mean, we have created in one of our companies, the social emotional learning company, a 3D avatar where we've digitized people's actual voice, and it can speak in what's called conversational AI. And I can tell you what, you cannot tell the difference between the real person and what we digitized. And I actually tested it. And Eric, you're going to smile on this one again. I used the digitized voice of one of my co-founders to go and access her bank account because of the voice authentications they use. That what we digitized and we're playing back off of the Microsoft cloud was good enough to fool an authentication voice reco print. So again, there's knowing that's there, but knowing that today your security is a target that's moving. The ability to understand the bots and the deep fakes is a target that's moving. And who knows, Eric, I might go ahead and finish running that little program to put your face on my shoulder and so that I can speak for you. So Dr. Sharif, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Dr. Talib Rafael.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharif. It's a very interesting discussion, for sure. But I want to add to what David said, because I think that the issue of security now is connected to the issue of technology and its development. And there will be always somebody doing something and somebody else trying to remedy it. That's not something that is going to stop at any point in time. I think it's a fact of life. But life is better. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not the age of fake and deep work, as you described it. It's the age of technology, really. And that's why what I wanted to say from the beginning. I want to say that we shouldn't bother ourselves so much into this. Of course, when it comes to banks and when it comes to currencies, this is an important issue. But other than that, when you talk about customer security, what are you talking about here? I don't know what you're talking about. But even if you're talking about something that has to do with the benefit of somebody, you have to trust your customer, your consumer. The consumer has to be trusted. The consumer is intelligent enough to know what's right and what's wrong. I think that's what I want to say at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eric.
Well, I look forward to seeing my face over David's shoulders. I'm sure it'll be, if he's doing, I'm sure it'll be more intelligent and thoughtful. Probably go deeper into subjects. We had cases where we were building systems back when I was doing government things, where it wasn't just important of who you are, but where you are, what role you were playing. So we had independent proxies, first of all, to verify that, okay, you really are Jason, an independent Jason. But just because you were Jason didn't mean you had the right to do something unless you were acting in a certain role, which might be just very temporary or might be long term. So, you may be put in charge of something. And so you have that role. So there's a separate authentication to verify. Well, both those got wrapped. So you had a wrapper, who you are, encrypted verification. Then you had another one for role. And then there was another one that said, well, where are you? Because while you may be perfectly accessed, at work to do this, but if you're at a Starbucks, it wouldn't let you do that either. So you had to do what you could to verify, their location. You can get very sophisticated in terms of, who you are. So you get voted for something, like in Lisa's world, you suddenly get voted. Now you have the authority to make certain decisions or control some resources. Well, that was different than a moment ago when you weren't voted to that position. The other thing that was interesting is I helped start an Internet of Things company, and we were always worried about devices being the customer and checking in and spoofing and changing. And so now, as we get more decentralized, we have more devices talking to devices. How do you know that device is who they say they are, and is doing things? Can you fake that device? And you even had the man in the middle kind of things where they would intercept the traffic and then duplicate that and add something to that. So I would just say that it's quite interesting that we need to worry about who people are, what they're allowed to do, and we also have to realize that devices and organizations, like Steven said, the lowest common denominator. I mean, we had somebody do some device and go through the back door, and a chip left open in a refrigerator, getting access to the whole system because they were pretending to be the refrigerator, which had certain access. But if you didn't set the security right for that refrigerator, you could actually open up a whole lot, and they did. So I think this is as David said, as we start adding, quantum computing, biological computing, the neural networks, this gets a lot more challenging.
Is it my turn next?
Yes, Lisa, go ahead.
Or is it Steven? I forgot the order.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
It's hard to tell at first. So I'm thinking, because I actually just got a response from the company who creates one of the games, and they were talking about know your beneficiary, right? Because we don't necessarily have the opportunity to know your customer, but at the same time, some level of due diligence is probably a good thing. And with DAOs, sometimes it's unclear what the responsibility is, because this is new technology, new processes, practices and processes. And so there's, I think, two types of rules. There's the written rules, and there's the cultural rules, right? So something might be allowed legally per terms of play, but the culture might say, people in social media specifically might say, well, that isn't realized in this really in the spirit of decentralization. And that's a whole, set of discussions. For Alien Worlds, we have 6 planets giving away a lot of Trillium. And so we're hosting an upcoming conference called the Interplanetary Unconference. And we're going to gather the players who register to talk more about decentralization. What does that mean? What does it mean in that game specifically? And as we're giving out resources to people, what is desired from those planets to, act in a decentralized fashion, engage people, and so forth. And so determining how to collectively do that and institute some level of cultural rules is emerging, and it's really quite interesting to watch. But I see, I know of at least 6, I think, DAOs around us now that are giving away resources for proposals or different things. And not to mention the play to earn games specifically, right, for the original like mining type gameplay and so forth. So it's, I think, a sign of what's going to come. And we would do well to not only argue the ideologies, but also think about that it's here and now. And it's not just about the future, but what do we want to do now to protect our communities that are decentralized, as well as our companies and organizations.
I guess I'll follow up on that. I think just really practically, when you look at your business, everybody's different. Everybody's business is different. Every platform and organization is different as to what the KYC, know your customer, needs are. And you have to look at, I think, first the implications of doing business and not knowing your customer. So you might be able to get by, like Lisa said, the playing the game is not a big deal, knowing or not knowing who these people are. But when you pay out benefits to them, are there implications, legal implications, that you need to be aware of? So in the United States, a lot of people don't understand the Office of Foreign Asset Control, which again goes back to my main business. Covers all sorts of financial transactions, like insurance payouts. If you get in a car wreck and they have to cut you a check to pay for your car, they have to screen. These insurance companies have to screen and make sure that they know who you are and you're not on that list before they send you your check. And a lot of people don't understand that just paying out a little bit of money like that can actually trigger some implications with a lot of different government agencies, even around the world. So knowing the implications of not knowing your customer, I think, is the first thing. And then identifying the components of how you actually identify these people, whether it be through the information gathering part of, making sure that their identification is correct. And I think David brought up some great points about, the security and confidentiality of that information that you're gathering, making sure it's safe. Obviously, you want to be aware of the privacy as you're gathering that, but you still have a job to do to make sure that you know your customer. And then I think as you're gathering this information, looking at every single point in the chain, both inside and outside the organization, to figure out where the weak points are, and identifying all those weak points, and then making a decision about, because you're going to find risk, you're going to find weak points, and identifying what your tolerance for risk is overall. What will you accept? And then you put that together in policies and procedures, and make sure that you're okay with it in your organization, and legally you are on safe ground with that. And I think it's funny, a lot of people look at outside the organization or in the chain of command of the information and identifying your customers, but there's certain things that can happen along the way that are very simple, that can completely undermine your entire process. So I'll give you 2 examples. So one, everybody's understands and probably has heard of the Ticketmaster Taylor Swift Capital One pre-sale that went bonkers and no one could get tickets. So my daughter wanted a ticket. We couldn't get one in the other pre-sales, and I don't have a Capital One card, but I looked at the Capital One pre-sale and quickly identified a problem with it. It was set up so that you were supposed to enter your the first 6 digits of your Capital One card. Most people don't understand that the first 6 digits of any credit card is the BIN number, and it identifies the bank and the card program. So it's actually generic. And if you search for Capital One BIN numbers, you will find in the first couple search results a full list. And so I just went in and we copied and pasted some, and we were into the pre-sale. We still couldn't get through, but that was the problem with the pre-sale, is that they set their standards to something that they thought was secure, and it wasn't. So there's that. And that was an internal problem that, they were trusting their developers to make the right decisions, and they didn't. Another one also involving my daughter, I had to call and update some things with her insurance. And I was on the phone saying that I was an 18-year-old girl, and I gave the right birthday, I gave the right everything. But now in our culture today, because of how everything is, it's fine. You can socially engineer that. I just said in my own voice, I said, yes, I'm 18. This is my name. This is my birth date. I'm calling to update this information. No questions asked. They let me buy. They let me update all the information on the account. So there are failure points that are very simple that you can get past in this. So I won't belabor that, but you need to look at what's right for your organization, what the risk tolerance is for your organization, and identify all those weak points and shore them up the best you can, and hope that somebody like me doesn't get into your pre-sale or your account to update your information. So.
Jason?
We lost our host, Dr. Sharif. Again, he dropped off the call, returned, and then he's dropped off the call again. But just to continue the conversation, I'm happy to build on that further. I think that there's a lot of constructive content all here, and that I think that Lisa and Steve have a point in common a little bit in the sense of beneficiary of know your customer. That a business that gives a good treatment to know your customer is actually benefiting their customers. All the information is sensitive information, all of it, and in some way it is like a list of entities that are unsanctioned. They're sanctioned, right? That's sensitive information too, because there are people who will take that and be like, "Those are my customers, not my not customers." You see how it backfires? And like it's just okay. So security systems are best evaluated by their weight in the motivation of the attacker, and that like you can make a steel safe for if you want to keep something protected, you can make a steel safe with walls that are infinitely thick. Make them 1 meter thick. Make them 1 kilometer thick. It doesn't matter. If somebody's motivated enough, they can still melt that metal. It's still away. And that with computer systems, the vulnerability is often the person who has a credential proof of some sort. It's a barcode, or they have the right number, they have the right login number, or combination. And that Steve's story is kind of a funny one, because it's sort of like quite of identity proofs, because you actually had all the information you needed, right, to satisfy the question. That the sound of your voice is irrelevant in the face of the other proofs, but any proof can sometimes be spoofed, even a good biometric. And the bad part about biometrics is that if the spoof is out, it's permanently out, because your biometrics don't change. And if somebody just gets a digital twin, a perfect replication of how your voice sounds or how your face looks or something, like exactly the way that the digital scanners read them, then it's a password that is permanently compromised that you can never reuse. So biometrics are on a short runway to obsolescence, in my opinion, although they can be put together in good ways and creative ways. The point that I was really hoping to add to this so far, though, is that the identity tools we use often reveal far too much information and useless information for their utility. For example, if a person needs to prove who they are, that they are who they say they are, just in a general storefront scenario, like to buy, let's say something like cigarettes, or where there's an age restriction, right? Whatever else, you're revealing your home address for no good reason. What you need to prove is your age. And the same card that has your age on it also has your home address. And you don't need to share that part. You don't need to for its utility. That's just one little example of times where the KYC process is not benefiting the customer, right? But I really appreciate Lisa's introduction of that way of understanding it, because you facilitate the soundness of your system, right? Like there are all of the stakeholders of your system, all of the people who log into your platform and use it in whatever way are stakeholders, because they will have their information compromised if your system is compromised. Therefore, you know who's visiting and what they're doing and mind your traffic, etc. And so, yeah, there's a good balance to achieve in all of that. And I appreciate this group for helping me learn about it. So I'm not coming at it from a totally like technical expertise perspective, but I understand it as an important aspect of commerce, really. Also, Eric, I wanted to add for the IoT part, that's a lot of surface area. And those devices might not be spoofed in the identity of the device, but those devices could potentially be abused in terms of the information that they're putting through, and compared to what they're supposed to, right? So how exactly to button that up tight is, and how to prove to people that it is buttoned up tight is the other part too, right? Because you got to give confidence to people to say, like, let me explain my system. It's not too much, it's not too little, but this is sort of it. And good luck melting through the thick steel. It's not worth it. Oh, I wanted to add, good systems sometimes invite attacks, and that they can adapt to the curve of those attacks. It's like practice or something. And also, yeah, keep it in mind, like not too many eggs in one basket. Because if all the eggs are in one basket, then there's no such thing as a thick enough wall, right? But for any little basket, if the wall is just thick enough that the prize behind it is not that much, then you're inviting far fewer attacks. Even a person who is really, really excellent at self-defense, if they're getting attacked all the time, they're going to have losses and harms, probably, to show. And the safest position of all, truly the safest position, one where you're getting attacked the least. So there's game theory to consider in terms of the way that KYC is approached. And in the most constructive light, it's a big advantage for any business who does it the best in terms of differentiation. I'll leave that as the second comment.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith.
Jason, I love your last comments, because on one of our websites, I actually have a fake website with a honeypot on the other end, that we do exactly what you say, because we have enough people hitting our sites every week that I want to have the forensics on some of them. And there's just enough information there, and it's just hard enough to get to. But our forensics collect everything once they go in there. And we've purposely architected it to extract maximum forensics. And that's the concept called a honeypot. And yeah, they work really well when you're out there. And it helps me create my blacklist even more and more for what we do across all of our domains as we set up our reverse proxies. Because that's one of the ways to do things. I just would like to, because I'm going to have to get off in a couple of minutes, Dr. Sharif. I just like to finish with a couple of real quick little comments is those 5 pillars of information security. You can DuckDuckGo that on the web and find them. They're excellent tools as a starting point for people who do not understand how to secure their electronic digital access. In North America alone, there's over 100,000 cybersecurity companies. Why are there so many? Because no one does the whole system well. So you need to understand you've got to put security in layers. You have to use multiple products, multiple layers. The biggest threat to your security isn't your technology, it's your people. And human capital creates the biggest threats you have to go through and to use it. There is a lot of stuff happening in this area. In the United States, DARPA has 2 programs directed totally to this, and one was called media forensics, and then there's another one that's a semantic forensics. Both of those are putting things out to give you guidance on what to do, so there's good ones there. Also, though, you need to also look at all your social media. Social media is where a lot of the deep fakes is done, a lot of the bots are done. And Lisa, I actually think one of the regulatory places where we should see more regulation around bots and deepfakes is actually the social media companies, because they are a lightning rod for the exploitation of this. Another place we really have to do is we have to look at education. The public is horribly underinformed when it comes to what we can do with this. With the tools that I can put my hands on in a very short period of time, I can impersonate almost anyone, and many of them are very good. If you're Eric, where you and I would differ, if I impersonated you, one of the telling places is our jaws. My fake of you and your jaws would move differently, and that's one of the tools that some of the AI programs are using to try to detect deep fakes. And they're actually that good in that they can, it's not your eye movement, it's your jaw, because that's such a complex movement that is there. But there's work being done around this area. You just need to really verify what you're doing. Sometimes you need to go back and run enough forensics, and I'm not talking about formal forensics, but you need to go back and say, where did this come from? Are there other places on the web who's saying the exact same thing? Can I validate it? You know, the U.S. had a president who said, trust but validate. Well, I'm sorry, in the age of deepfakes, you have to trust but verify as well, too, and to make it work. But Dr. Sharif, this is a topic that is good for any citizen in any country in the world, because it's going to impact them. And it's one that where the education is just so important. And build your security and your trust in layers. Don't let it all be just one layer thick, like was said earlier. So Dr. Sharif, thank you so much again for letting me be part of this. I could go on and on, and particularly where this is headed. As Eric said, as we begin to put biological networks, quantum computing, as we begin to look at post-generational AI, and particularly into the area where I can do full artificial intelligence in a sentient being, which is what the one researcher at Google claimed recently. But I would almost push you back to a movie. I love to go back and refer people to. The movie is El Machina, and it was a robot that became human. And Fortunately, we can do most of what was in that movie today. And that is a good thing to say as you look at this, it's here, it's now. And unfortunately, most people in the world will be impacted by this at some point. So, Dr. Sharif, thank you for letting me be part of this.
Thank you. Dr. Talib Rafal, what's your concluding remarks?
Okay, I want to add to what David said, to say that it is important that we look at this thing in separate layers, not just one layer, definitely, because one layer makes one solution fits all. That's not right. And the other thing is the educational part. The education part is very important because we in the developing world are educating our kids to be of certain caliber, but this education is not working well when it comes to internets and the digital world, and that's something that we need to work on because the security issue is an issue that we should all be concerned about, but it's not the cybersecurity only that's important. It's all the security. That's what I want to say for this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eric, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Well, just the idea that security isn't one tool, one thing that fixes everything. Analogy is with the physical world. You can increase your security by putting a fence around your building, but it's still a fence and people can get over it, around it. So maybe you put barbed wire on that. Okay, few people will be deterred by that. Then you can put lights and cameras, and they can still get that. But then you have the buildings, so you can harden the walls. You can put bars on the windows, and they get in the building. They can still find a way in that. So you have a room, and you make that hard, and you put a safe and a lock. And even for regular control of people going in, you have a control at the entrance, you have control at different points in there, you have a secure facility that might even have the combination to get in. But the more you do that, the more expensive it gets. And one of the problems is organizations used to have these security rules. And I remember teasing that one place, the security rules were the same for the menu at the bowling alley than for some classified sophisticated space. I said, really? You're going to pay that much money to protect the menu at the bowling alley? So what if somebody corrupts it, take it down, start over? But no, you have one security. So it's kind of like Lisa said, it depends what you're doing. You have to pick and put your efforts on what is more important and realize it's just always a trade-off. You can spend more time protecting, but it's going to make things more difficult to get in and out of, and it's going to cost you more money.
Yeah, and I just quick add to that. So it's the realization that you're never going to 100% prevent these things from happening. So doing your best. And then the education part, I think, is huge. I just want to harp on that a little bit more because, making sure that people understand there's always a way to circumvent these things. And as you're designing your systems, think through how would you circumvent it, and getting good at trying to find ways to circumvent it. I make a game out of it when I go to places like, how can I circumvent their security system just for fun, and it's good practice because it helps me get smarter as I'm designing my own systems for, making sure things are secure. So.
Thank you, Mr. Jason.
And just be aware that it's diminishing returns. It may not worth spending an extra $1 million to get a 0.0005
Right.
extra security.
Right. Unless you have that much money.
You want to spend it.
Yes, Mr. Jason.
Okay, sorry, I switched from the headphones and I missed just the last maybe 5 or 6 seconds or so. But yeah, I do the same thing. Like, it really is the best way to learn, in that I'm not directly in the security industry, but there's a whole hardware aspect to it in building security. And that to combine low tech and high tech solutions tends to be where the balance is best achieved. And also, on that game theory aspect and being at peace with the fact that doing your best is the best you can do. Think it through. Use your mind, really, right? And look around and understand. I guess there's a lot to balance in terms of handling the difficulty and the opportunity that is within this, and that why it's worth it, right? Communicating that, and that there's an aspect to this where we provide security to each other as peers, kind of like a doctor's orders thing, where, okay, privacy is a form of security, right? And that security is also about the perception of difficulty, the reality of difficulty, and that when people try things and they don't work, they give up after a certain amount of time. Although I wanted to add this, I think that Russell Brand wrote a book called Revolution. He inverted love into revolution and discussed about how the rigidity of the apparatus, the high walls, and the bank vaults exist because of the persistent attacks of people and their relationship with property. And that a person's relationship with property and money has to do with their jurisdiction, which is also embedded in this identity stack motivation aspect. And that there's a dimension of interjurisdictional cooperation that relieves some of the motivation. And we can see that the difficulty, like the number of attacks is increasing, right? And not the severity of it is increasing, and the costs that are become a burden on all businesses to use technology, but also endure all of the costs of these security difficulties, can be relieved, I think, with the right approach to balancing privacy as a measure of security, making standards around that. I wish David Smith was here to hear me say the word standards. That's his favorite. Standards. Yeah, I don't know. Those are my concluding remarks.
Thank you. This is excellent discussion. Specifically, like we can learn a lot of things how we can engage with our customers. So hopefully through this session, our audience can learn a lot of interesting things. Thank you, Mr. Eric. Thank you, Mr. Jason and Dr. Talib Raphael for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Thank you, Dr. Sharif. Thank you.
Thank you.